Hello, this is Citizen Participation Section A lecture. Our prioritized standard is Government and Civic Standard 35. Our objective is to identify the ways in which one becomes a natural-born citizen and inspect the process of naturalization. While other nations are bound by common ethnicity or religion, Americans are linked through citizenship. Our government grants its citizens many freedoms and rights. For instance, we have a freedom to exercise civil liberties and pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Citizens also have a right to vote in elections for public officials and also to run for public office. Now, these freedoms and rights do not actually come without a cost, as citizens are expected to do things in exchange for these privileges and protections from the government. The 14th Amendment, which was ratified in 1868, if you love dates, guarantees American citizenship in one of two ways. You can either get it through birth or through naturalization. Now, all persons born within the U.S. or any U.S. territory are considered to be natural-born U.S. citizens, considered to gain this right through birthright. Now, if a child was born outside the U.S., but both parents are U.S. citizens, then that child is also considered a natural-born U.S. citizen. This is called gaining your citizenship through acquisition. Now, generally, if a child was born outside the U.S., but one parent was a U.S. citizen, then that child is usually a U.S. citizen. Now, there are some exceptions to this, which is why I say usually. Depending on what year your parent was born, and if your parents were married or not, there are some variations because certain congressional laws have put restrictions on this. Currently, having one U.S. citizen as a parent will actually make you a U.S. citizen. Now, a child born, now that meaning a child under the age of 18, born outside the U.S., that is adopted by a U.S. citizen, actually becomes a U.S. citizen. So while not actually considered a natural-born citizen, you are still considered a citizen even if you are adopted by U.S. parents. The process for non-citizens to gain citizenship is known as naturalization, which is administered by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or the USCIS for short. Now, those hoping to go through the naturalization process have numerous steps they must go through prior to becoming a U.S. citizen. Those seeking naturalization must meet certain eligibility requirements in order to complete the Form N-400 application for naturalization, including you need to be at least 18 years of age. You need to be a permanent resident for at least 5 years. If you've ever heard the term green card, this is what that means. And be able to prove your continuous residency in the U.S. So if you can't prove that you live continuously in the U.S., you can't go through the next step. You have to be able to read, write, and speak basic English. You have to have a basic understanding of U.S. history and government or civics. You have to demonstrate good moral character and attachment to the principles and ideals of the U.S. Constitution. Applicants for naturalization must be fingerprinted for an FBI criminal background check prior to completing an interview with a USCIS official, which is sometimes better known as the naturalization test. The interviewer will review your application and discuss any changes that might have happened since it was first submitted. The interviewer will test the applicant's English ability through reading, writing, and speaking. The interviewer will test the applicant's English ability through reading, writing, and speaking, as I mentioned, but the interviewer will ask the applicant 10 U.S. civics questions from a list of 100 possible, where the applicant must correctly answer at least 6 in order to pass. Now, let me use my head so we can see the other questions. So there are 100 questions to choose that the test comes from. It's actually not a multiple choice test. It's an open-ended question. So the test covers important U.S. history and government topics. An applicant is actually given 2 opportunities to pass the English and civics test. They may reschedule another attempt within 60 to 90 days if they don't pass it on the first try. Although only about 62% of Americans could actually pass this test, while non-citizens going through the naturalization process, they actually pass it at about a 91% pass rate. So those that go through this process actually know more of those than people born here. After successfully passing the naturalization test, the final step to completing the naturalization process is to take the oath of allegiance to the United States at a naturalization ceremony. And this is the long oath of allegiance to the United States. Lots of big words there. All right, this completes citizen participation, Section A, lecture. Our prioritized standard again was Government Civics 35, and objectively now you can identify the ways in which one becomes a natural-born citizen and inspect the process of naturalization.